There are only two people in the history of the world who have held this title.
Yeah, that's true.
Head coach of the University of North Carolina women's soccer team. Last week, we had one, Anson Dorrance. This week, we have the second one, Damon Nahas, who, as we record this, is 2-0, undefeated. Take that, Anson.
This thing's easy, yeah.
I mean, I don't know what all this hype is about Anson and all of his wins. This is, yeah. Yeah, if he's at 89% win percentage, I'm at 100%. That's the word on the street. That's what I heard. So
it's just math.
That's just
honestly.
math. Yeah, that's just math.
What have these last 7 to 10 days been like on the field and off the field?
Yeah, on the field is normal. I mean, you try to keep it as normal, and I give the credit to the players. They've been amazing. Off the field, not so much. Off the field, the balance of, you're getting the general support from your friends and your family and colleagues and things like that, alum. And then, there's just some of the press that goes on naturally, well-deserved for Anson. So you're just trying to kind of keep things as normal as possible. It's not like it's the off-season. You have the off-season and you're kind of going through it and you have some time to kind of digest it. This was real time, and then you're trying to prepare for a game coming up with a very young, inexperienced team. And so you just kind of try and deflect it all and try and keep it to the soccer field. But again, the players have been wonderful, and I give them credit. And Anson's been wonderful as well in the transition. So just trying to keep it as normal as possible.
Did you have any idea this was coming? I mean, I think everybody understands that Anson was closer to the end of his career than he was at the beginning. But did you have any thoughts that this could be coming?
Yeah, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I had a thought, and then Anson, and you guys have been around Anson long enough to where he's just in his life, his family and soccer. That's been it. And as you know, his life has been his family, soccer, books, and pickleball. As you guys know, he's probably shared. But no, I mean, his energy over the years has been just continuing high. He got to view it from a different space than it was years ago. But we always talk about it, like here's potentially when he'll just know. And I really got the sense after he got back from his vacation, to be honest with you. He was away in a extended vacation that Melissa put together in Italy with his entire family, which when he came back, I can kind of sense something a little bit different. And it wasn't directly voiced to say, hey, it was more, I just kind of got the feeling. And even in preseason, I kind of got that feeling. The players didn't have any inclination of it. And then, when he shared with me where it was right along in that timeline when he's told Bubba and everybody. But I think without him speaking it, I kind of felt it. But still doesn't allow you to prepare for it. It just it goes real time. So he was really it wasn't anything that he had been too intentional about outside of that. It just felt like it was time.
When he tells you that it's real this time, what do you do next?
What do I do next? I called my wife and said, "This is it's Anson's retiring," and she's like, "Oh, are you?" She didn't really know what to say. She didn't know, and because I'm preparing for the games coming up against traveling out to Denver and all that kind of stuff, and the next thing was okay, how's it going to go? Because now it wasn't so much about the game. It was like, okay, when are the players going to know? Obviously, it needed to be delayed a little bit because of the announcement of Chancellor Roberts. That was the delay in that, and then Bubba, and then I'd meet with Bubba, and then we had a few things going on, and I didn't know what the next steps were outside of, okay, well, what are we doing? Let's work backwards from traveling to Denver, figure that out. When are we going to tell the players? That was Anson's time on his own to talk to the players. I was actually en route to pick up we had 2 recruits on campus, right? So this is the best part. So I'm sitting down in the office and we're chatting, and I'm saying, a little bit of an exit meeting with the recruits before I take them to the airport. And it had already been planned. I was going to take them to the airport because Anson wanted to speak with the team alone. And so I'm driving with them, and I know what's happening right now while I'm in the car. But in respect to the process, I wasn't going to disclose it just yet. So all of a sudden, I'm driving, and in the meeting before I left in the office, one of the recruits' moms asked, what is Anson's plan? how much longer does he think? And that's always something that we bring up in recruiting anyways, just to be open in dialogue. And she asked me that. And about 15 minutes later, we're driving on the way to the airport, and I can hear my phone going off. Text after text after text. I'm like, it's happened, right? It's already happened. The release must have gone out. It was simultaneous with the meeting. And I was like, listen, I got to share something with you guys. And I said, this was not being disingenuous. I just couldn't disclose anything. And I shared it with them. And, they were wonderful and supportive and shocked as everyone else was. And then the other recruit I got on the phone with immediately right after and shared it with them. And one was already committed to us, or there were three of them. Two were already committed to us, and one was just on a visit for the first time. So it was so much like, in the moment, it wasn't so much about even Colorado. I was like, okay, I got the recruits here. We got to discuss this. And now the team, next day is off because we had a game that day, right? We played Davidson. Next day is off. Let the team digest it. The press conference was that day. That was my first time kind of seeing the players. And then the next day is when we had video and I just addressed them. And then I was like, all right, we'll leave tomorrow. See you in the morning. And that's kind of where it went. So, yeah, now we're here.
Everybody says you don't want to be the guy who follows the guy. So how do you try and follow the guy? I mean, and I know that's still very new and very fresh. And
Sure.
Before we even came on, you were saying there's no real blueprint for this. But in your mind, how have you tried to start getting your arms wrapped around it?
I think had I not been here for 8+ years, I think it would have been, okay, how do you define that? How do you move forward? For me, Anson was really intentional when I came in regards to responsibilities, whether recruiting, training, video, all those things were on my plate. So you're doing that not just as a coach, you're doing that with the expectation and the standards that the program has been, so successful with over the years. So you feel that pressure, not even feel it. You try and go about things to eliminate that pressure. But to the outside world, the expectations are so high. So I think preparation happened a long, long time ago. If you sit there and look at all the numbers and you look at all those types of things, it could be daunting. I think just in your preparation and what you do on an everyday basis, if I went, when he made the announcement and then all of a sudden the next day I had to change everything we're doing, it would have been just absolutely overwhelming. I didn't have to change anything. There was nothing that was changed. There was nothing in regards to preparation. There was nothing. My voice was the same as it was before the announcement. And I think that kind of puts me at, peace, and the preparation's just exactly what I've done for the last 6-7 years. And that's kind of helped me. And I give him all the credit in the world for giving me the trust in me and giving me the freedom to kind of move forward like that.
How do you handle the fact that this is, at the time, an interim position? And,
Sure.
and Bubba was clear about that, and that's, I think we can all agree, the right thing to do to make sure this is the right path moving forward. I'm assuming this is a job that you want. Mm-hmm. So how do you try and not allow that stuff to kind of creep in while you are trying to go through the very normal process of a season?
Yeah, I think that's the most important part is nothing's going to change. What did someone say to me yesterday? And they didn't mean it in any negative way, but they said, congrats on the weekend, 2 games. It's a long interview process. And I sat there. I didn't know how to take it at first. And I said, in my head, I was thinking, the interview process for me started 8.5 years ago. And I'm hoping that weighs a lot greater than what just takes place in 2 days or 3 days, because, most people that are in my shoes, are not in my shoes in regards to all the depth of what's gone on, and you have a season to continue to prepare for. I hope this is the place I want to be. I hope I've done enough to do so. I hope that if Bubba makes the decision that I'm the one to continue to lead the program, that it has more to do with what I do in the next 2 games, has more to do with what I've done, and not just in results, because Anson will be the first to tell you, in the training and the preparation and in the recruiting, who's taken the responsibility of those things. And I give him credit for always voicing that and sharing it. Recruiting's a big, as you guys know, recruiting's a big part of it. And, for all of the great players that we have coming in, verbally committed, we're in a really, really good place in the future. And I think that hopefully that weighs a little bit too on what happens. But that's out of my hands. If I kind of sit back and dwell on it and like, oh my gosh, if this happens wrong or this happens wrong, you just can't move forward and prepare. So I know I'm ready for it. Do I think Do I think that I'm the right person for the job? I do, 100%. If I didn't have that confidence in doing that, then I would be the wrong person for the job. So I'm hoping Bubba sees that, and I'll respect whatever process he goes through.
Dean Smith and Bill Guthridge kind of famously had very different office styles, in which Coach Smith, you couldn't really find anything on his desk, and Coach Guthridge, very, very organized. Having been in the space in y'all's offices, I see some similarities there. How did you figure out that Anson was able to thrive in a very different office style than you? And did you ever wonder how it was possible to live that way?
Gosh, yeah. Anson's office, his desk is really organized right now compared to what it was. I mean, his office when I first got there, when we were at McCaskill, in his office there, it was stacked. I mean, he was finding, gosh, I don't know if I can even say this, but he was finding, I remember we were on a road trip and someone was cleaning out his desk while we were on the road trip. And all of a sudden she took a picture of herself on it and it was clean. And on it was like multiple checks of speaking engagements that he had that can take care of, someone's mortgages for years. Now, he was like, Anson just kind of goes with the flow, but he was like, Melissa finds out, she's not going to be very happy. So they were so outdated that he had somebody that was kind of interning to consider like calling those companies to see if they can get the checks reissued, and he'd potentially give them a percentage of it. I'll never forget it. So that told me early on what it was like. But as people see as unorganized as it may look, his day planner is to the minute, knows exactly what's going on when it is. And he also has, and I'll always say this, whether it's Tom or Corey, if he gets locked out of his phone, he doesn't even know that lock. He's like, Corey, come on in here. You need to help me out with this. And it's the truth. So I get to witness it, whether directly or indirectly. And he is, I guess it's like organized chaos, if you want to say. And so yeah, we're different and very similar in ways. But our officers are connecting, right? So like we are having meetings that are not scheduled. We're just having conversations, and then we get annoyed, we just shut the doors on each other. It's kind of funny, but no, he is wonderful, and he is as clear as what he has to do on a daily basis because he has it written down. It's just old school. He's got an old school calendar. His phone doesn't tell him a thing. It's this organizer that he has that is amazing to me. Yeah.
Tell us just a little bit about your background, if people aren't familiar with you. Kind of what is your history and what did bring you here to Carolina ultimately?
Yeah, I'm from New York originally. That's where I grew up. I played at NC State, ironically. George Tarantini was the coach and has since passed, but he was heavy in recruiting in Region 1 back in the day and brought me here. Anyway, fast forward, I got into coaching just kind of indirectly, and we used to work camps and stuff like that. And one thing led to another. I have a technical academy for kids. I'm my 25th year. It's just 6 to 12-year-olds. That's really where I started my foundation of coaching, and did that and still have a group of people that still work with 6 to 12-year-olds. And then I got involved in Castle, which is now NCFC, and slowly worked my way up into the ranks there and ran different programs and was the technical director for them for years. And then I coached teams, and my teams, were really successful in the time nationally, and won a bunch of national championships, and a lot of players that made national teams and the youth teams like that. And then what that brought me was, Jill Ellis was announced as a technical director for U.S. Soccer, and she was still at UCLA before it was announced. She was watching our teams, and she saw me at some camp, and she reached out to me and asked if I would come and help her with one of the first youth teams that she had, and I did. And then from there, they hired me on as a U15 national team coach, which was like a per diem job, an auxiliary opportunity for what I was doing. So I was the national teams for years, and then at different levels. And then in 2014, I did the technical work for the women's national team in preparation for the World Cup in 2015. So a lot of different experiences. But through those years, Anson was watching my teams, and for a couple of years, Anson had recruited me to come here. And I had declined because I was so heavy in youth and the national teams. And then finally, after 2 years, as you guys know, he's pretty convincing in recruiting. He took me and my wife and Melissa to dinner, and my wife is the one that really pushed me take the leap and try it out since I'm already here. And he said, this is how it's going to look, and this is what I'd love for you to do. I want to kind of change some things, and he's followed through with that, and it's been the best decision I've made.
Anybody who watches someone else do something always has those moments where they're like, well, if I was doing it, I would do this. It's like how I always think, if I ever got to sit in the big fancy chair for the podcast, here's what I'd really do.
Yeah. Every now and then.
Have you ever sat in that without him here, just to kind of roll?
Oh, yeah, and I just spin around and get dizzy, and then I forget what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you specifically want to do this year that would be a departure from maybe what Carolina women's soccer is accustomed to?
Mm-hmm. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's been really, Anson wanted some different changes. So changes are not necessarily, changes have happened gradually over the last 4 or 5 years without taking away the core or the heart of what's made Carolina so great. The mentality aspect of it, right, is something that he's always preached, the competition. Look, I don't think no matter how you change things, you can't win if you lose those. And he's done it better than anyone else. Now, how you do it and approach it and different, he has the cauldron he's had for years. And that's helped in development in so many areas. We have always, over the last few years, tried to tweak it a little bit, add to it, how it is, our generation of players now, without losing really the heart of what it's meant to bring out in regards to the competition and driving and player development. So just tweaking some of those things, but not losing it. I mean, I would be, if I were to change everything, it would just be changing it to change it. For me, I spent too much time here observing without even hearing it from him to say, these are things that absolutely have worked and will never change and should never change. It's just adding some other nuances, but we've made those changes, and I've been able to implement them over the last 5-6 years. So I don't think there's major changes. I think it's about respecting what's been so good. And just like anything, whether it's recruiting or in training, it's making any adjustments that you would make last year, 2 years ago, and forthcoming. And it could be week to week sometimes. So I think it's not trying to change what's worked, respecting it, and then moving along like that. Otherwise, I think my wheels would be spinning. And just doing things to change. But I think people can see it gradually over the last 5 years.
There's quite a bit of turnover on this year's roster from last year's.
Mm-hmm.
Some professionally, some via the transfer portal, which is a fact of life in college sports. As you looked at those departures, did you learn anything that you feel like will help you going forward that was a common thread there?
Yeah. I mean, well, the 11 players going pro, that's a reality. So the combination of that and then 3 players that were in our recruiting class for this upcoming year that had an opportunity to go pro before they even went to college, that's a reality right now. And then you had some that went in the transfer portal, and all those are, as you mentioned, the reality of our college sport. But you have to look at everything and evaluate and say, well, what could have been different? Some circumstances were going to be that way no matter what and where they were. And you just kind of wish any of those players well. I mean, the ones that went pro, gosh, you're spending so much time with them right now and navigating their pro lives. I'm actually, early on, I was speaking to them more than I spoke to them when they were here. That's how often they needed it. And they also realized how great they had it here too. And I think that's a compliment. I think some of those that went into the transfer portal, it was one of those where you just have open discussion with them. And all you want to do is give them hope that they have the best experience. And when they were walking out the door, we helped them, get to where they wanted. I think that's an important part. And if they needed something today, they can call and we would be there for them. That's just part of it. And Anson's always felt that too. But with all those realities now, even after that all happened after December, now what the interesting thing is the players that went pro, you can't forecast that. You don't know it. And what happens is it happens so late that anyone potentially to replace them is gone, right, in a transfer portal. Sure. So what we did as anticipation is we had 4 of our girls that were 2025s attempt to reclassify, to come in early, to graduate early. And that was a significant, burden on them. Not to say burden, but they had to put some work in. 2 of them were able to, and Avon Alvarez and Trinity Armstrong. And then 2 of them tried. They couldn't, their state wouldn't allow it to happen, so they'll be coming in January. So we were anticipating it in case, because if those players did go pro, I knew that we would have scholarship money available for them. to be able to come. So it ended up working out, and we kind of rolled the dice, and it happened. So, and then you get a few pieces of transfers that we thought were significant experience-wise, with the balance of young and them, and it's been a really good blend. So we've been fortunate to stumble across some players that we watched over the last couple of years. And with COVID, you're like, oh, wow, these kids are still available. So, so it worked out, but you never know, right, until you come in. And when you sit there, we were joking because in the first game against Denver, you don't have any game film on anybody. Although we can see some pictures of Denver because they had 9 or 10 returners from their starting lineup. Colorado had 9 or 10 of their returners. They look at our starting lineup from last year. We had 1 starting from the last game. So there's good and bad to that. But the girls have proven that they're going to be a formidable opponent this year.
Carolina basketball kind of famously has the Carolina basketball family, and it's this huge thing. And women's soccer has some famous and successful and powerful women who have come through that program. How do you try, as now the head of that program, how do you try and make sure that they all stay connected and that all of these people still feel a part of the program, although the one thing that had combined all of them, Anson, has now moved on?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's not a day or a week that goes by that you don't think about the history of the program, and that has everything to do with the players, right? I mean, obviously Anson is really the conduit to that, right, and what he's built and who he's brought on. And for me, I have so much respect for all the alum. And, you'll have alum that are more directly involved, and you have some that are always watching from a distance. Sure. I think the biggest thing in connecting them is just our players. I mean, for them, their best way to communicate with them is be inspired by the players that are on the field and how it's going, and how they represent them as former, as far as alumni and what they've done here. And we talk about that respect. I mean, I don't think you should ever hide from it in regards to what they've accomplished. When the alum come and they see the new facilities, they're sitting and saying, geez, this would have been nice. You know what I mean? But they're the ones that built it. And I think for us to honor that and respect it, the best way we can go about doing it is to go on that field, no different than this past weekend, and show that grit and that love while we're evolving the game too, to try and get to the highest level. I think that'll serve well. That's our way to communicate with them directly. And we're going to make sure that we try and stay as connected as possible. Once we get through this whole window, we want to be able to, hopefully all the alums support us. For me, it's more about supporting the players. I just happen to be in a role right now that's supposed to guide and help these players develop and inspire the next group of players, and also inspire, our alum. We had a ton of alum out in Colorado. And that was really, really cool. And I like to think that if anyone that is out there, regardless of their feelings or the connection that they had, that they can sit here and really appreciate what these girls did on the field this past weekend.
As far as this year's team, what do they do well? What needs to get better before late October, early November? And aren't you going to have to navigate losing a couple key pieces for a period of time?
Yep. Thanks for reminding me. We just lost one this morning at 5:20 a.m. She was on a flight to Miami, Maddie Darlene. So she's off with the U20 World Cup. So we're so, we live in that world too, where we have to. So we're not in that, years ago you might have, it might affect you in one way or another with a young team, and with one that's an experienced player that has to now leave. That obviously hurts. We'll lose a lot when we lose Maddie. So I joke with her. I say, I hope you lose in the first 3 rounds. I hope you lose every single game and you'll be back. But obviously that's tongue in cheek. But you just, that's part of it. I think the most important thing that I've asked for the players is that they're coachable. And I think this is an extremely coachable group. That they're patient too. My biggest challenge is to be patient through a young group when outside, whether fair or unfair, expectations and standards are never going to change. So why hide from it? There's no excuses for anything. No matter who we have, we're going to feel confident in who we go forward with. With all those challenges, then by all accounts, we have to wait till the final roster. Trinity will more than likely be selected for the 17 World Cup, which 17, I mean, think about it. That's how young she is, in October. So right now it's getting ready, everyone to know, what their jobs are to keep getting better, to keep them motivated and positive, but they are extremely coachable. And now it's about, once it gets real, as you guys know, you get into the season and, games start And now how do you navigate that? How do you continue to talk to everyone and have them be prepared, whether they played 0 minutes or played 90 minutes? Our job is to kind of keep everybody ready to go for when their opportunity comes. And with a new roster and some players going away, people are going to get their opportunity. And now it's about being ready to perform. And we have, Evelyn Shores is recovering from her injury, and hopefully we'll get her back sooner than later. So right now it's about building. We have lots of work. It's more about relationships that sometimes just has to forge, organically amongst the players. Because schematically you can talk about different things, but knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses and learning how to communicate with each other when you don't have really any experience together, that's always going to be a challenge for a coach. So for us, it's not about making that any excuse. It's about, trying to accelerate that while being patient, because we're going to make some mistakes along the way, as we did this past weekend, but thankfully we were able to recover from it.
Was that grass really long at Colorado?
Listen, is this gonna? Can they hear this podcast?
I don't think so. Do they have the internet?
Do they have the internet there in Colorado?
Coach Prime uses all the internet there.
Well, Coach Prime was at the game. He had a cowboy hat on at the game, and some other football players that were heckling our girls, which was great. One of the girls she was heckling scored the last 2 goals, so I want to thank them for doing that. So yeah, no, you're right, because we got there and we were trained there a few days before, and the grass was long. So I was like, well, obviously they're going to cut it. And they didn't, and I like to think that it slowed the game down a little bit. We actually met as a team, and we talked. One thing that I've done for years in my coaching career, even through youth, was always have a discussion with the team about and let them be the voice of it. And we had a little exercise in different groups to state, some of the non-negotiables that we want as a team for them to be able to discuss. And I would say more of standards to make sure from their lifestyle and how they're going to go about things, and so they can hold themselves accountable as opposed to us dictating it as a rules aspect. But one of the things are, what are factors that we can't control, and a couple of those were refs you can't control, and how do you navigate that? Weather, field conditions, and ironically, on that day we sit there, weather, it was hot, we're in a high altitude, and they kept the grass high. So all of a sudden, in their head, they already had it in their head that these are potential factors, so we can either complain about it or overcome it. And they did. And it was long. You're right. It was definitely long. But it's good that we found a way.
You can't draw it up that way. And you've been on the wrong end of some finishes like that the last few years, as everybody knows. What does a finish like the one at Colorado with a couple goals in the last 3 or 4 minutes to win the game, what does that do for a team that maybe is trying to find its way?
Yeah. I mean, I think it started in Denver, right? We had an unfortunate PK that we gave up. We were in control most of the game, and then that happens. And as you guys know, and we learned last year, momentum is real, and especially when you have a young team. So, we were pretty intentional in the second half. We wanted to make sure that we had those that were on the field at any point last year that were riding out the game against Denver. And it was one of those where you don't know how it's going to go, and maybe you can make some different choices, but we stuck with it. And what I needed to see is whether or not they were going to find a way. And any of the players that were on the field last year were on that field in that second half. And when they did, and Maddie grinded through and kind of got knocked down, got up, laid it off to Bella, and when they scored, you kind of get that feeling. And then all of a sudden they won it, and you can kind of feel like, wow, because last year you were, at times you can feel like waiting for something bad to happen because of what happened against UCLA in that last 16 seconds is something that you just can't get past sometimes. And that's a mental hurdle. So then fast forward, we go to Colorado, we're in Colorado playing against them, and we are in complete control of the game. They're not even trying to press us or do anything. We have opportunity after opportunity, don't score. And as you know, a 1-goal game, anything can happen. And then a mistake happened, girl finishes it well, we're just out of position, and then you feel the momentum, and then free kick, goal happens, and you're like, oh man. So again, now you're in that situation. But it was really interesting. There was no panic. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, anyone that's coached before, you can kind of get a feeling. And at the same time, I might have had that feeling, and we may not have pulled it out. But all of a sudden, you got, at that time, you need players to make a play. And Olivia Thomas, at the top of the box, grinded and fought. Like, she had people all over her, fought, a quick trigger. And then we talk about, following up and just doing a little gritty thing. And there's Kate just following up on the touch. And then a minute and a half later, whatever the time was, Tess plays a great ball and Kate's in the right spot. I basically hit off her. and it went in. And all of a sudden now you can just feel it. You feel that energy with all the obstacles of altitude and traveling and everything that's happened in the last week. Let's not just talk about it as a game, but everything the girls have had to be a part of in the last week. For that to happen is something that will pay off for them in the end. And, I couldn't be any more proud. And it was an exhilarating moment. I mean, out to high altitude, I was like, the energy, I was out of breath celebrating. I was almost out of breath. I had to call Brandy, our trainer, over to help me out. But it was well-earned, and they deserved it, and they were really resilient, so I'm proud of them.
Last thing, at least for me, so New York, played at NC State, like no real history at Carolina before you came here. What have you learned about Carolina in the time that you've been here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously my day-to-day with Anson, that's the obvious, right? Kind of experiencing that, and a lot of the stuff I learned from him was just through conversation, observation. But the one thing that's been extraordinary for me is just the athletic department in general, the coaches in general. I mean, I get to see the girls interact with all the different athletes, and you can kind of witness the sense of excellence across all athletes, right? And they all support each other, and they also push each other indirectly. Like they want to kind of, achieve what they're achieving, and that's a huge motivation. So the connection of the community of athletes is pretty extraordinary, and a genuine support for each other. I witnessed from Anson, like his genuine love for the university and wanting every program to do well is real, no matter what it is. We always talk about it, but to see the excellence of staff here and the collaboration together, whether it's like just in passing or a little note here or just watching them, for me, I just feel, whether I'm in the position I'm in right now, and over the last 8 years, just you be ignorant not to pay attention to what's around you. That's not your field. And, whether it's basketball and any of them, whether it's in football, whether it's in fencing, whether it's in baseball, lacrosse, I mean, we get to be there with, lacrosse in our own facilities. Track and field, fun fact is Chris, in track and field, we both went to the same high school, John Glenn High School in New York. So when we had the Zoom during the pandemic and he was being introduced, I was like, Chris, who's that? And then all of a sudden, like it just connected. And so he was one of the first ones to reach out to me when this all went down. And I really appreciated his support and the rest of the staff. But I would just say, just in regards to the sense of excellence, not just in one sport, has been extraordinary. And the people here have been extraordinary. When I first came here, when I first got the job here, I was blown away that people even knew. And I remember picking up my tickets, the basketball tickets, and the person at the ticket office knew my name. And I was like, that's random, right? I mean, what are the chances? This is like a couple of days old. And then my wife was coming down to be let into the parking, and they somehow knew my wife's name. And what it does is it is a sense of family. People can speak of it, but you guys know, you've been here a long time. It is a unique place in regards to the support from each other. But I would just say I'm just surrounded around excellence, and I'm just trying to absorb as much as I possibly can.